let's say $1 billion of speculative capital went in to speculating on the Bitcoin ETF. Okay, once that news is out, you'll sell. Then what do? Oh, the ETH ETF, well, that's going to come by maybe June. So in which case that $1 billion goes into ETH. Now, what's interesting about ETH,
Hey guys, welcome back to Everyday Finance. In this video, Raoul Pal discuss about Bitcoin and other crypto. According to Raoul Pal always stated that it depends on price. So if the price you know was the finest advertisement you wanted for an ETF to launch in November 2022, you would have raised $30 million and everyone would have been ashamed, much like in the future when you raise it after Bitcoin. Bitcoin has increased in value by 150% in the last year, which is pretty interesting to people. However, the question is, will institutions use the ETF primarily? No, they will use the RAs, which is really for individual investors. For the former, it makes sense because they can use their brokerage app or RAS, and by doing so, they can use it very easily and profitably. However, some pension funds may do so even though they still lack the regulatory clarity necessary to deal with this asset class. In 2024, some monster pension fund has taken a monsterized position in Bitcoin, will undoubtedly make headlines, and lots of things Raoul Pal discuss, so please watch the video to end, and share this video, and subscribe our channel Everyday Finance. Thanks.
Always said it's a function of price. So if price, last year was the best advert you wanted for an ETF to launch. If you'd have launched the ETF in November 2022, you'd have raised $30 million and everyone would have been embarrassed.
Yeah, like
you raise it after Bitcoin's done 150% last year. That's pretty interesting to people. So now, are the institutions going to use the ETF? Mostly not. It's mostly the RAs. It's really for individual investors. So those pools of capital and the individuals, it makes it just super easy because they can just use their brokerage app or they can use their RAA because then they can get fees on top, so they're incentivized to do it. Will some pension funds do it? Yes, but they still really don't know how to deal with this asset class yet, and they want more regulatory clarity. I mean, it helps with an ETF, so we will see it. One of the headlines that will come across the tape in 2024 is some monster pension fund has taken a monster-sized position in Bitcoin. It's not just Bill Miller and Texas teachers. It'll be a bunch of others. We will see those headlines. They will be the pioneers to show the way to others that you could do it, much like Paul Tudor Jones was a pioneer in getting the hedge funds to start trading it because he was pretty early into getting on board with it. Yeah, always the case. Look, I mean, he's been very single-minded, and I would argue brave, because you're using leverage by issuing convertible notes to buy, and it could have gone horribly wrong had the last cycle got worse, the down cycle, but he did it. And there's generally the people who make obscene amounts of money generally take quite a lot of risk. And those that don't make it aren't recorded, and everyone forgets those who don't make it, but they'll remember the winner, the person who managed to get it right. So yeah, my thesis remains unchanged. So I'm mainly denominated in Solana. Second is ETH. And like you, I think ETH has a big catch up as soon as this ETF is done. So that pause after the ETF is announced is, I think, the start of the ETH run. Because it's very simple. Let's say $1 billion of speculative capital went in to speculating on the Bitcoin ETF. Okay, once that news is out, you'll sell. Then what do? Oh, the ETH ETF, well, that's going to come by maybe June. So in which case that $1 billion goes into ETH. Now, what's interesting about ETH is it's a third of the size of Bitcoin currently. So if you put the same $1 billion into an asset that's a third of the size, it probably goes 3x more than Bitcoin did. And ETH, with the deflationary asset, the more activity, the less ETH there is around, and all of the staking means there's not a lot of liquid ETH around if this happens. So it could get very, very squeezy. So yeah, I think that, and maybe at some point it'll play a bit of catch up to Solana. I think Solana beats it all cycle, but there'll be legs when ETH does really well, much like Bitcoin started off out of the gates faster than anything. Then Solana caught up and exceeded it. I think ETH's chance is next.
Raoul Pal believed the beginning of the ETH run because it's very straightforward. Let's say $1 billion of speculative capital entered the market to speculate on the Bitcoin ETF. Once that news breaks, you'll sell. So what do? The ETH ETF, well, that's going to come by maybe June, in which case that $1 billion goes into ETH. Now, what's interesting about ETH is that it's currently a third of the size of Bitcoin. So if you invest the same $1 billion in an asset that's a third of the size, it probably gains 3 times as much as Bitcoin did. You see, ETH is a deflationary asset. So the more activity, the less Ether is present. And all of the staking means there's not a lot of liquid Ether around if this happens. So it could get very, very squeezy. Let's back to the Raoul Pal interview.
Yes, there are, and I'm not smart enough to do it. You know, I start up an asset management company called Exponential Age Asset Management, XPAM, that actually invests in, it's a fund of hedge funds, so invests in digital asset hedge funds, so they go out and do the work and do it because that's their job. I'm just not smart enough to find it. One thing I do know is some tokens with new charts will do well. Who's that going to be? Is that going to be, we've seen it with Bonk, could it be with any of the others? A whole bunch of these, and that's a bit of a crapshoot who gets adoption. The one thing that for everybody else to bear in mind is that these cycles tend to play out the same way. So it tends to start with crypto spring, is Bitcoin dense. We then start transitioning later spring, and it seems to be always DeFi season. I don't know why, but DeFi season starts taking off. Then you start hitting alt season. When global liquidity starts increasing year on year, alt season hits and ETH starts outperforming Bitcoin. And then you get some of these ridiculous tail events. Also, NFTs lag. So we're kind of like we were beginning of last year in crypto, where some of the NFTs have found a base and are rallying. Others are still bleeding. Obviously, some of those will go to zero, obviously. But that NFT space, it really takes off when ETH goes to all-time highs. That's what happened last time around, and then it utterly explodes because everyone's got money to recycle. They buy trophy assets, everyone wants to buy a punk, and then off it goes again. So we've got that madness still to come. We've still got another leg, meme coin madness, dog coin madness comes later still. So that's in Q2 is kind of dog coin madness to come. So all of the psychology of the degens, that'll play out as normal, plus the sensible bets of the right layer ones.
According to Raoul Pal, one thing that everyone else should keep in mind is that these cycles tend to play out in the same way. It usually begins with a crypto spring that is dense in Bitcoin later on in the spring. We transition, and it seems to always be DeFi season. Raoul Pal, not sure why, but DeFi season starts taking off next. You start hitting alt season when global liquidity starts to increase year on year. Alt season hits, and ETH starts out performing Bitcoin. Afterward, you get some of these ridiculous tail events. Also, NFTs lag. Raoul said we're still in a similar situation to what we were at the beginning of last year in terms of crypto, where some NFTs have found a base and are rallying while others are still bleeding clearly. Some of those will go to zero. If you learned something from this video, then please like this video and subscribe our channel Everyday Finance, and we will meet in next video. Thanks.